Assalamualaikum. Ismi Yusuf. Shukran jiddan inshallah. I imagine it's pretty hard to understand language you don't speak. And what good is a great presentation if the presenter is ill-prepared to present it? I'm pretty sure you all have great messages to present for us, but I just wanted to give you the 5 keys to understanding the power of your audience, a highly underrated topic. And we're going to go over that, and here's the agenda. We're going to start with the 5 key concepts. Interlaced, we have the self-assessment that we're going to be doing at the end of every section. And we're going to follow up with a video so you understand the concept behind everything. And we're going to summarize and follow up with a Q&A. Now, we have Drew, Walter, Carla, Pauline, and myself, Joey. And I'm going to hand it off to Drew.
Thank you, Joey. As Joey just said, my name's Drew. How are all y'all doing? Good. Good. We passed out a survey to take before this presentation, and I just want to highlight some of the commonalities that we all shared in that survey. Our experience level, we all determined ourselves to be more likely intermediate public speakers. Our attention spans, they go about halfway through the presentation. Our age ranges, they're very all over the place, dispersed. And then the chapter we want to learn about, there was a few that the majority said unsure, so you could probably figure that answer. But I'm going to be discussing a topic, identify the target. And the target has to do with the audience. And why do you need to get to know your audience? That's a rhetorical question. But what I want to ask the audience is, can you think of any ways that you may be different than the person sitting next to you? Yes? Cultural. Yes, that's a great example. And so the cultural difference, and amongst all the other differences, they affect the way that we receive a message. And so that leads me into the next slide, identify the target, and that's one of my whys. Our audience members' needs are different from each other. And so how we receive that message is going to be different. And on top of that, you want to deliver value to your audience with your presentation. They expect something in return, and so why identify the target is to deliver that value to your audience members, and that's how you connect your message to your audience. Example would be just a high-level technical talk. If your audience members just have a basic understanding of the topic, it's going to go right over the heads. It's going to miss them. And that means you didn't assess your target correctly. And so which brings us to the third why. All this forces an audience-directed approach. It forces you to think in terms of what the audience wants, not what the presenter, what you guys want to communicate to your audience. And so when to use that, just general everyday discussions is when you want to use that. You want to know who you're talking to. Business meetings, obviously you're going to how you're going to get your message across to a CFO of a company versus a VP of sales is going to be completely different. Public speaking, just public speaking engagements. You want to assess your audience so you know how to present your presentation to your audience. And so the why, now we know the why, the whens, the how. That's the main question. How do you do that? And so the easiest way is just a survey. Send a survey out to your audience, and that's what we did with you guys. One of the first troubles we had with preparing that survey is what questions do we ask? Are they meaningful enough questions to connect with our audience? And so a great tool that we found was a scheme for questions to ask your audience, and that's one of your handouts in front of you today. It was from Ryan Held's A Guide to Better Presentations. It's that one right there, underneath it. That one. I wish I had an example up here to show you, but it's a list of your purpose of your presentation and connecting it with the needs of your audience and type of questions to ask. So you all have that and can prepare your own assessment or survey for your audiences if you want to. Another great tool, or another how, is making care the driving force, caring about your audience. That gets you to really focus on being audience directed. And then just some common mistakes with the questions. If you ask too few questions, that's a very common mistake. tends to be too generic, and then a self-directed attitude as opposed to an audience-directed attitude. So let's take 30 seconds and your assessment that you have in front of you for 5 keys to unlocking the power of audience. The very first section is target, know your target, and just go ahead and fill in a couple reasons why you need to know your audience, why you need to know your target with what we just mentioned. I'll go back to the slide real quick just so you can look at it. But just 30 seconds. Just work within your team. Sorry, I only gave one help. Discuss this as a team. Just the first question, not the whole thing. So does anybody come up with anything? Was that useful? Okay. So let me get all of y'all's attention real quick again. We only have a limited amount of time, and I hope that was more productive than it seems to be. But you all have some Lego pieces in front of you, and this is something we're going to do throughout our presentation. And I'm going to ask you to go ahead and connect the orange pieces together. Just real simply, the round orange piece to the rectangle piece, just like this. And we're going to build onto this as we go. Okay? And so that concludes my topic, and I will leave this here. And then I will go ahead and hand this off to Carla, and she'll tell you more about the next topic.
Hi, my name is Carla, and I will be speaking about gauging your audience and the importance of why, when to use it, how to use it, and the common mistakes people make. So some of the reasons of why you would use this is to set the mood of how you're going to speak to your audience, determining what kind of words, jokes, humor you're going to use. You don't want to use a lot of jargon that's going to confuse them. It also helps you to seem credible if you know your audience. They think that you know them, they know that you took the time to get to know them, who they are, what they know, and it makes you credible. It makes them believe as though you know who they are. Going into the when to use it and when to do it, you would do it mainly before your presentation. More than likely right after you get to know who your audience is and who you've done and when you've done that research. You use the analyzation of what Drew spoke earlier, and you start making hypothesis on what they know and how they know it. If you're able to communicate with some of those people that will be your future audience, you can get with them, sit down, ask them questions about what they know, what interests them, how to keep them engaged. You can also start at the beginning of your presentation, especially if you're going to go into a group that you don't know who you're talking to. You can always go into it and just ask them if they know anything about the subject at all, if they know nothing, if they know a lot, just to engage your audience, see how much they know of your topic, and to see if you have to change any of your language and verbiage during the presentation. Also, you would focus on knowing your audience during your presentation. Look throughout your audience. If anybody looks confused, use that to interact with them, ask them what's going on, if there's something that you need to repeat. Then I will be going on to how this helps. How to use it is whenever you speak, it's dividing your groups into experts and beginners and knowing who you're going to be speaking to. If you go into a room full of experts, you're not going to go in and talk about all the basic topics. You're going to try and work and avoid that and use the language that you know that they expect. On the other hand, if you're going to go out and talk to a group of beginners, you are going to make sure that you give them valid information of the basics so that they know what you're talking about. And make sure to avoid any complicated words that that only experts might know. The most common one is when you'll deal with a mix of a group of beginners and experts. So you're going to have to learn how to balance to deal with both of them. So the best way to do it is by getting maybe emails beforehand and handing out just handouts with basic information that they know will be needed before your presentation. Make sure that you don't use too many complicated words, but that you also don't use too many simple ones. You have to keeps them interactive. Maybe if you know that it's going to be a mix of your group, make an activity that's going to get the beginners and the experts to engage. Make the experts help the beginners learn how to understand the topic. Common mistakes usually happen when you use too much jargon, with too much language that people won't understand. Even if you have a group of a mix, and you have experts, not everyone in your group is going to know what you're talking about. So you're going to have to make sure that you tone it down and that you learn how to balance everything. And another important common mistake is that people don't take in mind the language barriers of their audience, which is another good reason why to do research on who your audience will be and measure their diversity. If you're going to be speaking to a room that's possibly filled with people that have English as their second language, you might want to consider which kind of metaphors or what kind of acronyms to use that they might not know. And now we will take another 30 seconds to answer the second question of the assessment. All right, now if I can get everyone's attention, we will build on the portion that Drew made. You will grab your orange piece, and then you'll grab your blue piece. The blue one. And then you will build onto the bottom of the orange one and put the blue right underneath it. So it will look like this now.
You can also see it at the top.
And now I will be passing it on to Walter.
My name is Walter, and I'm here to talk about surveying the emotions of your audience. So when we take the time to survey the emotions of your audience, we have a better chance of successfully persuading them at the end of the presentation. So as a quick fact, the average attention span for adults in 2000 was about 12 seconds, and in 2013 it dropped to about 8. So essentially you have 8 seconds to persuade a classroom full of students that could be on their phones or preparing for a test for the next class, or on social media. So you really just need to get the attention of the audience and keep it. So that's the struggle. It's important to connect our message with the audience on a deeper level, because if you connect on a deeper level, it shows that you as a presentation giver are driven by passion and purpose. And at the end of the day, you really care about what you're presenting. If you're not connected with your message, with the people who are listening to you, they tend to drift off and not pay attention. They'll get on their cell phones. And being passionate and motivational and connected with your message, you will improve the odds of a successful, persuasive presentation. So when do you use this? When you appeal to the individual, you're essentially making speaking to the audience in a way that relies on emotional or personal connection to the subject matter. A good example of this is if a visual was shown to the residents of Colorado that shows fires in the Rocky Mountains. Another time is to survey emotions, as when you're conveying your personal ideals and at times you need to step back and think what type of audience that you're presenting to and how they'll react to your own personal ideas. How do you use this? So when you're surveying the audience emotions, it's important to respect the level of passion from your audience. You could be talking to a classroom full of students that aren't very passionate about what you're talking about, but also you could be, on the other hand, presenting to a group of protesters that are extremely passionate about what you're talking about. So it's important to measure the amount of passion. You can convey deep passion of a subject. You feel more interested and engaged with someone presenting. And then the last part is knowing negative emotions. And they have power to take away from a presentation, but they also have a little bit of power to, if you use them usefully, they can add to your presentation. And then lastly, I want to talk about is common mistakes. It's a mistake to ignore negative emotions, like I said before, because they can be used when usefully they're used. They can be very powerful. And secondly, if you insert your personal bias, insert personal bias also is a mistake when surveying emotions. You should understand the values and cultures of your audience without putting on your own personal bias. You should be confident in what you say and how you say it, and not have excessive fear, because a confident and composed speaker doesn't necessarily have excessive fear. Okay, so now we're going to do the third part of the surveying emotions. So take 30 seconds to fill out the pros and cons on the third question.
We got to figure it out.
Having because I'm there, and I'm not like something near the just the point is right there.
Okay, everybody. Yeah. All right, everybody. We're going to pass. We're going to keep going on the presentation, but pass it off to Pauline.
So, whenever you go ahead and grab your Legos one more time, you're going to grab the two small pieces attached to the front of the blue blocks. Don't be afraid if they fall, they're tiny. And then you're going to attach the big yellow piece to the back, the long rectangle piece in the back. Okay? And there you go. Just like that.
My name is Pauline, and I'll be talking about determining persuasive arguments. So the why, when you're presenting the information to an audience, it is a very difficult task, especially if the audience does not understand the value of the information you're conveying. And you will need to identify individuals in the audience who wield power and influence by researching and understanding the roles of the different individuals in the audience before you present ideas. Such individuals will help you fight the opposition you might face. Your research will also help you ensure that you will be effectively passing the information to the correct people. And you will also need to get in touch with individuals who understand the audience really well, and they will help you support your idea to the people. So when you finally convey the message, you'll be able to do it efficiently. And the one is after your message has been conveyed. So now once the audience understands and embraces your idea, you will need to determine ways to expand your reach. And ways you can do this is using digital influence, basically like social media, beyond YouTube, LinkedIn. You can find different ways to basically reach beyond your listeners. So you will need to do more in-depth research, focusing on individuals who can help you do that. And you will need to be authentic and effective in engaging them. And you will need to link your new idea to the standards, like ethical standards that connect with the audience in order for you to make them accept your idea. And for the how, you will need to establish people who are experts, and they're very credible sources of information, and they will be very beneficial to you and your audience. And your audience will realize the value of your ideas based on your credibility. And you will need to research the networks of the experts themselves and see how in-depth they are on the topic you're presenting. And once you get all your data, you want to make sure you don't overwhelm your audience with too much data, because once you overwhelm them, they will basically be overloaded with information, and they will stop responding to the information you're presenting to them. And you will need to be well-informed and detailed when you're presenting your information to them. And common mistakes that are made are when you're conveying to your audience, you want to make sure that you do not present your information for the value that it does not offer. You want to base your information or your value on your research. And you need to respect the opinion of your audience. Do not try and impose your views on them. And when you're doing your research, you want to consider both the positive and the negative data. Do not be biased on your data. So now I will take the green piece. Oh, I forgot the assessment. So take 30 seconds as a group to describe the goals of your group's presentation on the handout we gave you.
Okay, and back to Pauline.
Okay, so, oops. Now you will take the green piece and attach it to the bottom of the yellow pieces. And be careful because they have a tendency to fall. Okay, and it should look like this. And now I'm going to hand it to Joey, and he will talk about the target and benefit statements.
The target benefit statement is a powerful tool in every presenter's arsenal. The enemy of my enemy is my ally, and everybody should understand the power of appealing to someone's self-interest. The effective way to gain support is by appealing to someone who has something to gain and finding out what it is, and clearly stating that by allying themselves with your message, they stand to benefit. Now, why you do this is reaching decision makers, leave the lasting impression, and give the presentation meaning. But beyond this, it's to have a far-reaching goal and have a far-reaching effect that goes way, way beyond the time of the presentation. Now, whenever it comes to finding an audience, you start by targeting the goals of decision makers, gatekeepers, opinion leaders, to ensure the maximum efficacy of the presentation. Reaching the decision makers is obviously the main goal, but because they have the most power. But you can't forget the gatekeepers, because they can bar your message from even reaching the decision makers. And you also have to keep in mind that you have opinion leaders who can reach the masses, who can also reach the decision makers because they are so insular. They're so tightly knit. Now, when you do this large engagement, such as this is a small to medium-sized engagement, but you also have peer persuasion, someone that's a little bit more intimate, someone one-to-one. Then you have to feel the room of what's going on now. And I understand, you know, I've had my own faults in this very presentation, and thank you for sticking with us. And you have to adjust in the moment. Now, moving on to how. You have to sell the sizzle. You can't just stick to the main points of the target. You have to sell what they're going to benefit from. And they will go into more depth after they found out what they have to benefit. You have to follow the process, go through the research, you have to go through finding the emotion, find everything we've covered here today with the 5 keys to understanding the power of audience. Now you have common mistakes, of course. You focus on the few. That's the one person, and that's going to be maybe the CEO or the main investor you target. You have focus on the many. You water it down, trying to please everyone all at once. Or you just wing it, and you know what that feels like. It's not a good feeling, right? You should prepare a little bit. Okay? And I'm going to end this self-assessment by telling you to get together with your group and fill out your own target benefit statement for your presentation. Thank you.
That's okay. Once you get up there, we will like them.
Okay, thank you very much. Now, if you will go back to your Lego pieces, you're going to have the one gray solid piece and 2 small straight pieces. The solid piece goes on the bottom, and the 2 small pieces go beyond that. And you have your very own key to success in unlocking the power of your audience. Keep it with you as a reminder of this presentation. Thank you. Now, I'm going to show you a video that's going to be going over targeting your audience. This is something to give you a practical understanding of what our message is. Carla? Now, I want you to follow what he says and focus on his research.
Okay, so you'll know the punchline of this story.
Everybody here?
I borrowed this story from a wonderful book called Made to Stick. Made to Stick is written by Dan and Chip. Chip teaches with me at the business school, and Dan runs a nonprofit in the city. Wonderful book if you're interested in learning to communicate that. And in the book, they tell the story of Texas in the mid-1980s. They had a tremendous littering problem. Litter everywhere. And it was costing a lot of money, and it was hurting the pride of the state. So they invested in this ad campaign. Some of us are old enough to remember this in this room. You remember the name of this guy? Woodsy the Owl, that's right. Give a hoot, don't pollute. He and Smokey the Bear came out around the same time, but Smokey clearly dominated. Okay? So give a hoot, don't pollute. They invested in this public service campaign. They ran ads on television and radio. This is way before the internet. And something amazing happened. Texans didn't like Woodsy. They, in fact, saw an increase in littering after this ad campaign was run. So this frustrated those in government. So they hired a bunch of academics and said, help us fix this problem. It's costing money, it's hurting our pride, our reputation is at stake. So these academics came in, and the very first thing they did was looked at who was doing the littering. Ladies, this is not going to surprise you. Mostly men. And not just any men, it was men between the ages of 18 and 34. And further, they wanted to know, what about these men? What makes them tick? And if you've been to Texas or you're from Texas, you know that people take great pride in being from the state of Texas. Being Texan is very important to them. And based on that, they created the message that all of us have seen if we visited Texas, the Don't Mess with Texas campaign. Within 2 years, they reduced littering in the state of Texas by 80%.
So can anyone tell me why that messaging worked when they switched to the Don't Mess with mess with Texas?
They assess their audience properly?
Absolutely. The reason we chose this video is because it identifies specifically what and how they learn their audience. They found and used information on age groups, genders, and values that identified how the message for the campaign would be better represented and with a positive impact. Okay? So now I'm going to summarize this entire presentation, and we're going to move on to the Q&A. Now, in short, the 5 keys to unlocking the power of audience is formed around the presentations invested before a presentation. Every presenter needs to know who is receiving the message, and this includes gauging their level of expertise to avoid talking down to them or missing people entirely. Every speaker needs to remember the importance of emphasizing the listener and to accurately value their passions as well as their fears. In order to frame the argument in the most impactful way possible, you have to focus on your individual person. The final 2 keys focus on the importance on prepared arguments and statements, ensuring the longevity of a message. Every interaction needs to win over uninformed initiates or even staunchly opposed groups. Now, I'm going to open everything else to Q&A. And then down here at the end of our presentation, we have a website for anyone who wants to gather any more information after the Q&A is over. Thank you.